Χρειάστηκε μεγάλα αποθέματα αντοχής και δύναμης και βλέμμα που συνέχεια κοίταζε ψηλά. Χρειάστηκε σταθερότητα που να μην κλονίζεται. Χρειάστηκε διάβγεια, προσοχή στη λεπτομέρεια και σεβασμό. Για να δημιουργηθεί και να παραδοθεί πριν 5 χρόνια το Κέντρο Πολιτισμού Ίδρυμα Σταύρος Νιάρχος, χρειάστηκε όλη η αφοσίωση, η ενέργεια και η σκληρή δουλειά πολλών ανθρώπων. Και αυτός είναι ο λόγος που όλα αυτά τα χρόνια εκπληρώνει και θα εκπληρώνει καθημερινά το σκοπό του.
Και με κατάθεση ψυχής, ελπίδας και αγάπης σας παραδίδουμε το Κέντρο Πολιτισμού. Σήμερα γίνεται δικό σας.
Να είναι ένας μοναδικός δημόσιος χώρος που αγκαλιάζει, φιλοξενεί και εξυμνεί τον άνθρωπο. 5 χρόνια Κέντρο Πολιτισμού Ίδρυμα Σταύρος Νιάρχος. Φτιαγμένο από τον άνθρωπο για τον άνθρωπο.
Καλησπέρα και καλώς ήρθατε.
Good evening. Welcome to the Cultural Center Stavros Niarchos Foundation. I'm Naama Lupo on behalf of the Cultural Center. I have the honor to host you here at Pharos and through internet for those who are away. Today's event is inscribed in the celebrations launched today and will be completed on Wednesday, February 23rd, on the occasion of the 5 years following the delivery of the Cultural Foundation to the Greek state from the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. For this discussion on the subject, the Cultural Center as a paradigm of public space and of a public-private partnership, and we are honored by the internet presentation of Mr. Andreas Dracopoulos, President of the foundation. Invitations has been extended to all the former prime ministers. We are honored by the former prime minister and MP, Mr. Antonis Samaras, representing the government, the former minister as representative of SYRIZA. And in the panel, we also have the CEO of the Cultural Foundation, Madam Elly Andriopoulou, the former prime minister and MP, Mr. Papandreou, representing Kinal, will address us through a video. At this point, I would like to give the floor to the coordinator, Mr. Ari Kalabidis, who is an urbanist and visiting professor to Manchester Metropolitan University. Good evening to all. It is a great honor that we all found a way here to launch this great celebration of the 5 years, because next week, on the 23rd, it will be exactly 5 years from the day this Cultural Center was presented by the Foundation Stavros Niarchos to the Greek state, and therefore the Greek people. Along with this, the National Library and the National Music Center, a park was created at a point where no one expected it, a park that turns the whole city towards the sea, creates new spaces. And when we speak of public spaces, we should not forget that we're not merely speak of ownership status, it is also included, but we also speak of issues of accessibility, really public space. A really public space is one that is accessible to all, indiscriminately, regardless of their physical ability and fitness, of their social class. And this is what we will be elaborating here. We will not merely speaking about the public space, we will be speaking about that, but we will also elaborate on this formula that allowed the creation, this special cooperation of charitable foundation and the state. And at the end of the day, we will speak about the present, and the future of the space, which has already been embraced, suffices to look around the people thronging here. This is why we gathered here today. A discussion will be organized here along with Mr. Dracopoulos, the president, who is connected with us through video. And at the end, we will also have the possibility to launch a discussion, I hope with some Q's and A's that you might raise. Mr. Dracopoulos, allow me to start with you. Allow me to start with you because now, in October, I go back to October 2006. In October 2006, it is officially announced that the foundation will be funding this project. We listen about the National Library and the Music Hall. It is not taken for granted that these two institutions will be at the same space, same place. So something must have happened. Let us go back in time. How did this arrive? How did these two combine? And how do you have the adjunctive park? And then there will be a second question addressed to you. Good evening to all. We thank the Cultural Center for this event and all who are present. I think that we should all look back before looking ahead. And it is true, 15 years ago, we were already, the foundation had already been established 10 years before, and we searched how we could make a bigger project that will address the needs of the Greek society. There had been many conjunctures. Actually, I don't believe that anyone knows all details and minutiae, but what has to be held back, that this idea was created. We called it a triple project. It was in communication, and people would say it was the opera, it was the National Library. What was the third one? And we would say it was the park. It was very difficult for some to understand that indeed it was a triple project. And the National Park and the opera hold equal footing for us as the park. We speak of a project that we started in 2009, was completed in 2015. We were very proud because this was within the timeline set, within the budget, in the middle of crisis. There have been excellent cooperations with some 6 or 7 governments that have gone through during that time. There was excellent cooperation, as I said, and it is important always, not only how a project is completed, but also the process, the whole process, how it is created. And the processes, the transparency, the hard oil, the partnership, not only of public and private sector, but also between Renzo Piano and Burdenplan, between Deborah Nevis, who was the sub-architect on lateral physical landscape, with our Elly Pangalou, the Greek landscape architect. At all levels, there have been partnerships and excellent cooperations that we take for granted, but this is not so. The whole issue is in the whole process, in the transparency, the hard work, and the fact that it was in operation within 6 years. It was officially inaugurated in 2016, and in 2017 it was presented to the Greek society. It was presented with key at hand. This is offered to every single Greek citizen. And to cut a long story short, there were 2 wedges. The first, to have the project completed, that was a fact, and the second great wedge, to be embraced by the people, and this was the fact. We could not even fathom that that would happen, and we're extremely happy for that. The second bigger wage is still at stake, and I'm quite afraid about that. I was not that much afraid during its presentation, but I start getting scary now, and I'll tell you what. We had said that we hope that this center will be a paradigm. We will be a paradigm on how Greece can operate in other such projects and other spaces. And anyway, we wanted to avoid for the cultural center to be corroborated on how Greece operates. I'm a little bit harsh, but I don't mean it like that. way. We hope and we help and assist so as to manage for this project to become indeed a paradigm, to be emulated in its operation and its mission. It is a project that really belongs to every single Greek citizen, but which, however, also needs very hard work and vision. And there are many issues that we might discuss in due course, where I believe that this cooperation, which must be pursued, this is dynamic cooperation, this is not a one way out, so as to make sure that the future of the culture at large and of the center will be excellent and will also help others in other cases to operate similarly in such conditions and with such a vision. Thank you. Yes, we will be discussing about this and other things, but I also have one more question, because you mentioned Renzo Piano. Quite usually in such scale of projects, there are architectural competitions announced. Which was the way you selected Renzo Piano? Because the architecture is of huge importance on how it operates as a landmark for the city, how it has been embraced and so forth. So what was the process for the award winner, for awarding this project to Renzo Piano? Well, at the time, we had recruited in New York an office which is specialized in identifying high-caliber, globally renowned architects for such kind of projects. Kubert and Robertson was this company. So we were more focused from the viewpoint that we had no experience of the matter. Therefore, we wanted to have a short list of the 20 or 30 best architectural offices that could perform such a very specialized work, because it is specialized. It combines National Library and Opera and the Park. So we had a short list of 25 offices, and we came close when we had a real final short list of the final 3 architects. We said that the final 3. We had meetings with the architects, we visited their offices, their practices. It was an issue of vision, whether we could perceive that we would be able to operate with someone who really respects the vision of this work, respects the fact that this is a charitable foundation that will create this project and give it away. So there were many facets to be combined, both on a humane and practical practice. And we had this kind of chemistry with Renzo Piano right from the start. Let me give you a very quick example. In one of the discussions there and the presentations, it was discussed that Acropolis would be seen, what can this offer? And I remember Renzo Piano saying at the time that Acropolis is unique. We have full respect, but we should not be afraid to move ahead with other projects which will be complementing Athens and promote it into a new hub, a new center of attraction. That discussion was extremely important. Of course, one has to pay respect and pay tribute, but should not be afraid to move ahead. Thank you. Mr. Samaras, when this whole project starts, sometime 2009, you are the Minister of Culture at the time. You table a bill, therefore, in the Parliament that sets the contract, the obligations of both parties, of contracting parties. You define how an organization will be established that will be run the project, and they will be managing it. And then again, you are intertwined in this subject, and later as a Prime Minister. So you have been very decisive in the life of this project. So I have a dual question for you. First, how did you experience your involvement in this project from the start? And the second question right away, what was specifically the experience of your cooperation with the foundation, represented by Mr. Dracopoulos? First of all, let me greet you all and greet you my good evening, both to the friend, Mr. Dracopoulos. I see Giorgos Agouridis facing me, and some 23 years ago in the Ministry of Culture, no, 13 years, I'm sorry, 13 years in the Ministry of Culture, a meeting had taken place, which I consider had been most important, so as to shape the form and character of this cultural center. I consider that this was an extremely important meeting because it was there that two qualitative revolutions took place. The first was that we implemented what Mr. Dracopoulos has said, that is the partnership of public and private partnership in such a large scale. This was something extremely innovative, and allow me to say, from a political viewpoint, because until now we knew you are either with the public or the private, and if you are with the public, you have to be of leftish, and if you were in the private sector, you were right-wing. This was abolished. We all became as one, a single unit that we will create something superb with the participation and partnership of both the private and public sector. This, I also saw it in my capacity as Prime Minister. This was a result of breaking this mold, this status quo. It was for the first time that again there we said something brand new through a partnership, which was the private sector and the church with its fortune. Until then, the church fortune was never to be touched upon. At the time, we tabled two bills, which on the same rationale and philosophy, we offered the possibility to develop for the country and use for the country, for the benefit of the country, the ecclesiastical real estate or fortune at large. The second revolution was that for the first time we established the notion of the new city, that is the notion of the seafront, that is advancing Athens to Sunion, those that many call now the Athens Riviera, that is giving possibility to have a new perception, that we have a huge surface in front of us that can be capitalized by the country for the benefit of the people. Now, vis-à-vis what you said, the second question, I have to say that PPP, that is public-private partnership, was freed by any culpability. Suffice to say that in the middle of the crisis in 2013, I came here, if I'm not mistaken. That was the time. There was a work site, a huge work site. Mr. Dracopoulos informed me, briefed me on the construction works, and then from the viewpoint of feelings and breaths of the people in the worksite, I fully realized that this was a dream coming true, something that is a vision being materialized. And I saw that even the hurdles, the obstacles, were becoming an integral part of the vision. I remember that we came upon archaeological relics during the excavations, and all of a sudden, within the whole urban planning, the siting and the timeline of this project, we integrated this part to become an integral part of this dream that everybody experiences today. This offered huge force, I believe, because at the time, the new time plan was organized, and this was something that was fully observed by everyone until the inauguration of 2017. And when I say observed by all, I mean all indiscriminately, including all political parties. And therefore, that's the only bad thing, that I'm the only former prime minister present here. It would be the first time that all prime ministers of former political parties would agree upon one single subject. I hope that this eventually takes place. Well, here you pass the torch excellently for Madam Achtsioglou, because yes, indeed, we witnessed the continuation, but in 2009, when the bill was tabled, SYRIZA was against. On the contrary, when SYRIZA becomes government, not only follows suit of the project, but also facilitates the works and also is presented with the end work. How do you explain this contradiction? This flagrant no, categorical no of 2009, and this fervent yes from 2015 and onwards. What can you say about that? Thank me. Let me greet you good evening on behalf of the president of our party, Mr. Alexis Tsipras, in a venue which is a jewel for the whole of Greece, not only of Athens. Let me open a very brief parenthesis, very quick. I'll say that this is a space sentimentally attached to me because it's here that I had my first walk, my baby, my toddler boy, and it was the first time that he was he did not cry, and ever since I keep visiting this place every single Sunday. It is true, as you said, SYRIZA voted against this original contract, not because it was against the value or had the other opinion vis-à-vis the project. There were objections and concerns vis-à-vis certain legal terms of the convention, merely having to do with the financial branch to the public. For instance, there was a very strict legal clause vis-à-vis the public interest. That is, unless the public maintained the level of the project as they should, without intermediary choices, with this in abstractus, then the public would have to pay back the whole cost, that is more than 600 million euros. This is a very binding term, and there precisely laid our objection. That therefore imposed us, that made us be so reserved. Nevertheless, it was something given. There was the contract, the onset of the procedures, and then actually 2 stages went by. And the first from 2015 till 2017, where at the level of the Prime Minister we had the cooperation. I believe that Mr. Dracopoulos can corroborate. There was an excellent cooperation at high-ranking levels, with continuous meetings with the involved parties at the level that is of the Prime Minister's cabinet. And from 2017 and onwards, when it is fully presented to the state, that this is under the umbrella of the Ministry of Finance, again, there's an excellent cooperation, ongoing cooperation vis-à-vis the result. I think that was a paradigm for the operation of the state, because we were challenged there at 3 levels, the Ministry of Finance, Education and Culture, to go hand in hand so as to proceed. This is not easy. So there's no case and there was no doubt, and it is corroborated that this is a high-value project, not only for Attica, but for the whole of the country. We will come back to the obligations and liabilities of the state, but let us not forget, as the Prime Minister has said, former Prime Minister has said, Mr. Samaras, there have been various governments in the meantime, but one of these was also one presided by Mr. Papandreou, who unfortunately at the last moment he said that he could not attend. Nevertheless, he sent us a video that we will be following. Good evening. The Stavros Niarchos Foundation Cultural Center represents in the best possible way a modern paradigm where cultural spaces belong to all. It is also a challenge for the participation of the citizen in the creation of that. It is being built on a participatory basis, and therefore it is linked to freedom and to republic, democracy. Democracy demands natural physical spaces for the discussion of the creators. The Cultural Center has been decisive in changing the figure of the city, the whole city, not only the neighborhood. I had the vision for this project to be the first step for the refurbishment, the restoration of the whole seafront of Falliron and the restoration of Ellinikon. Our goal was for this Falliron front, seafront, to change radically. Areas that were practically inaccessible should be open, and through multiple operations and functions to unite the coast with the lives of the residents and the visitors. We wanted a new paradigm of a city that will converse with art, leisure, education, new technologies. A city that will inspire and will operate in a liberating manner in a very difficult era of introvert character and insecurity. All that has not become action yet, but you are decisive in your existence. And it could not have been materialized without the sponsorship, the exclusive sponsorship of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. The relation of the Greek state has not always been very harmonious with great benefactors, and therefore it is extremely important to have a very successful cooperation in the creation and operation of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Cultural Center. The measure of the culture of the civilization of a country is also judged by the existence of such initiatives. Of course, as we rest in the laurels of our ancient civilization, our monuments will become estranged and alienated. But as long as we culture today, the present, we also nurture a dialogue between the past and the present by giving a concept to our ancient monuments and our modern identity. An identity that must be dynamic, should reflect a multicolored, ingenious thinking, intellectual, open society. A daily cultural action really incorporates a symbiosis with the environment, the physical environment, demonstrates our multiple identities, and also embeds the respect and solidarity, respect to the multiple identities of our citizens. The Stavros Niarchos Foundation Cultural Center demonstrates the ecumenical values that allow us to progress with a feeling of solidarity. So I would like to congratulate all the factors and contributors of this work. I hope that continues equally dynamically for the next years ahead, and with the support of all of us. I wish you good continuation, every success in your event. Thank you, Mr. Papandreou, and we are very sorry he's not with us tonight. But what he spoke about, that is the humane values that unite us in such a public space, this is what we can all see every time we come by, every time we come here, every time we participate in its actions. And I'm certain that all people have embraced that. We spoke about accessibility to public space. That is quite characteristic. If you take a stroll around the space, the park, around the canal, you see how many people come here from all corners of Athens. This accessibility is something that really impressed me. I'm also an urbanist. I'm interested in that. You have a very special relation to the project. You were responsible for the project in the foundation. Now you're found as heading the operation, its operation. You know it very well. So what we see here, the accessibility by all, is it something that happened, or do we have to do with some principles governing the operation of the center? Good evening. It is a great joy to have you with us, and that you also follow us through internet. It's a great honor having you with us, because we can have this discussion on the occasion of this celebration. Accessibility has been right from the start integral part of our DNA. There are a couple of principles. The DNA of this project was precisely this accessibility. This could be seen at the stage of construction, because a building was erected that is fully accessible by all, but especially through its vision, because this project and of course Mr. Dracopoulos can further develop and present a vision, is a project that has been created for all the people. Even the addition of the public open space, open park, that makes it immediately accessible, the addition of the land library to the National Library, the addition of the alternative opera to the National Opera, offering a different repertoire. It's a different aspect within the original planning of the work. Therefore, both with regard to the project and what each agency offers, it's something different. And now, in the operation of the work, we try to enhance this principle through other improvements of the installations, because technology gives us the possibility to offer greater degrees of accessibility, but also through our actions and events. Our performances have also interpretation in sign languages. Recently, we started also guided tours in sign language, and we have braille maps. Therefore, in every minute detail, in every experience of visit, we'll try to enhance this accessibility. And I may have focused on the examples of accessibility for persons with special needs, impaired persons, but accessibility is also financial, social. We want the cultural center to be hospitable to all, and this is fully reflected by all the activities which are open. Many of them are free, thanks to the sponsorship of the cultural center, and therefore this opens. Yes, we really speak of inclusivity, that's true. You also spoke of vision. I'll ask Mr. Dracopoulos, this vision, what does it mean? Well, the vision of the Cultural Center hasn't radically changed. That is, our compass is the original vision of Stavros Niarchos Foundation, which is indeed to have a public space that will be a paradigm of partnership, to be open, inclusive, to regard the whole of society. And this is precisely what we try in different ways to serve and reach more people. The scale of this project is important. So along with inclusivity, is a second principle. A second principle is sustainability. So sustainability is equally important principle in its DNA, especially the environmental, which also started from its onset. We have the highest possible accreditation of ecological friendly, and we have high credits with regard to energy, the use of water, energy consumption, and this not solely on the buildings, but also in the operation. We try to enhance these principles through our operation to reduce our environmental footprint, and I believe we have a lot of work to do in that, in the operation, but especially through the sensitivity there is. You see, a lot of our training programs, the programs on school excursions, school visits, through our events, we try to reach especially the young generations, children, to introduce them to the principles of sustainability, because this is where the great change comes from. Mr. Dracopoulos, we speak of a vision. There are various things that we may say as far as the vision is concerned. So I would like to speak again about this partnership. This is not a usual PPP. It's not only an issue of scale, as said by Mr. Samaras, but we also have a charitable foundation that cooperates. We would speak of third sector. That is, it's not precisely private-public partnership. Now you have a series of cooperations abroad, especially in the USA, which are similar, where the foundation cooperates with the state sector. Let us open the horizon a little bit. Could you please say a couple of words, both on your vision about Athens, this center, and elaborate a little bit on this experience of New York and USA in this partnership, because there are definitely things to learn, culturally speaking, on how they operate differently. Thank you. I think that the subject is indeed multi-layered. That is, what's the concept of philanthropy, if you like? This is where this starts from. In the USA, the notion of philanthropy is integrated in their daily lives. For instance, the National Library of New York operates on a huge budget, hundreds of millions of US dollars per year, which we cover almost 50-50. The city of New York and personal donations. This is how they operate. They don't see it something different. It's something fully integrated in the so-called civil society in the old form. As far as we are concerned, it is a project which also in New York we've done a lot of projects with the National Library, with museums. But of course, the cultural center here is our biggest donation, which is not something passive. We erected it. We feel it as if it's our offspring. Our child is now adult, has its own life, has left the house. But as a parent, one can always be strict, and a parent is strict because of love. That's why I say I'm afraid, and I hear far more austere than perhaps I should, because we really love it. And because we have really loved it, not only financially speaking, one forgets that for 7 years, this was our main job. 24 hours, round the clock. We have really toiled on this project, and we wanted to continue pursuing and succeeding in the goals it has set. This project should not fall back, and if I allow the expression, it needs a huge work so as not to have it wasted. That these cooperations have to be pursued. There must be response both from the state. There is this response. Again, our relations are excellent, but there is some kind of vacuum. And the vacuum there is more or less expected because we are not accustomed to such kind of partnerships. This work has been gifted, has been presented to the Greek society, belongs to the Greek public sector. There is a philosophy that perhaps the foundation is behind, and rest at your laurel. Again, I'm more strict, I told you, because we have been through a very difficult, very dire situations over the last years due to the MOUs, the fiscal austerity, and also the pandemic lately. So there is hope, but we must all work harder. For instance, there is the metro line. According to the contract, the Greek state should have offered the metro line bringing the people to the cultural center. The cultural center has 20 million visits to date. That is double population of the whole country that has paid a visit to the culture. And there is no access through metro. Metro should have already been completed. From 2009, that is in the contract, it hasn't been created as yet. I know, again, that there are other priorities. I know we must get away from the pandemic. There are financial concerns. There's a lot of way to go. But at some point, the public sector must also observe its obligations. It's more than financial obligations. We're still here. We continue assisting the public sector, but we won't be ad infinitum, and we should not be present ad infinitum. This project must stand by itself. It's worth, and the Greek people are worth this project to really feel that it is their own work. So metro is most important. We are speaking about accessibility. It's a sine qua non. It's still not even in paper. That's why I'm so strict in what I'm saying. Because such projects, it's still young, then they will have maintenance issues. We must be ready to deal with them so as to stay high, at the high level that currently is, not for our own benefit. or any government, but for the good of the Greek citizen and any visitor. So we have obligations of the state, which are financial nature. We have issues that have to do with urban planning, be it the metro line or the neighboring area, but there's also other issues having to do with the management. Is there consensus that public space managed by the state are not at the best of their condition? So I would like from Madam Achtsioglou, how do you assess? You gave us your personal experience with your toddler in the space. How would you judge this public space? How do you view this? How can we have qualitative public spaces? Well, there is this notion that the state cannot, is not able. But I would tell you to look at Dionysiou Areopagitou Street, for instance. Look at Syntagma Square. They are very well attended and inclusive public spaces that we all enjoy under the absolute responsibility and management of the state. This is a positive paradigm, isn't it? On the other hand, look at Strefis Hill, totally deserted, public space totally deserted, under the full responsibility of the public sector and the municipality of Athens. So what does this show? It shows that the public sector is able, but it always depends on political priorities, on political will. The public sector is able, but political will is needed so as to set the priorities and demonstrate this public space accordingly. The cultural center, as you said, is a partnership with an SA, which, however, is of charitable character. We must never forget that. Is of universal character. We speak about a foundation that has a charitable character. Anyway, public space means universal accessibility, as you said. This doesn't only have to do with impaired persons, but also issues of gender. For instance, to have a space that will be enlightened, where someone will feel secure, that an 18-year-old girl can walk around this square without feeling menaced. Public space means uses. What kind of use do we want? We want a park, a school. Not everything could be restaurants and tourism. There are also other priorities. So from this viewpoint, public space entails a choice of the use and therefore consultation with society. So public space also demands consultation with society. This has happened with the municipality of Halamri, for instance. Paris has done so for the moves and the transport system transformation. Public space also demands accountability and demands, of course, urban planning and regional planning. And this planning can only be effected through public policies, public tools. Whatever I say does not mean that cooperations are not necessary and desired. Quite the contrary. But the query is who sets the priorities? And I believe the priorities on the planning must be set by the public, because it makes the overall planning environmental. Therefore, yes, resounding yes to cooperations. They can give excellent examples, excellent results as here. Mr. Dracopoulos always raises his concerns. I believe in 2017, with Alexis Tsipras as Prime Minister, he has read messages of the citizens who were saying, please don't give it to the state, it will be destroyed. Such concerns were expressed by the citizens because they had this agony that the public sector cannot manage things. But where we lie today, that the prestige of this space is multiplied, it demonstrates what we can attain. Let me say something, merely. Yes, Madame Achtsioglou is right, but if you remember, at that same day I had said, I had also read the poem by Kavafis on the barbarians. It was from the other viewpoint. I said that there are no barbarians. That is, it is up to us to succeed. So I was expressing those concerns, but on the other hand, I was saying, let us not view barbarians everywhere. We can, but we must have set the bar high. And something quick with the public space that I think very often. I live in New York, and therefore I've thought of the notion of the sidewalk. That is, the life starts from the sidewalk. The public space starts from the sidewalk. And I say so because I was also raised in Greece. And this doesn't have to do with political parties and viewpoints and policies and mayors. We have to create and build our sidewalks. We have no sidewalks. No one can walk in Athens. Public space, the heart of the public space, starts from the sidewalks. Yes, let me open a parenthesis before giving the floor to Mr. Samaras. I always propose to politicians to have a stroll at Solon Street in the heart of Athens to see what the sidewalk is and then discuss about anything else. I believe that I would also like to hear you. I would like to hear your view on the current operation of this space and the importance of the cultural center for Athens, for Greece, for culture at large. Listen, when there is a really revolutionary, innovative offer with such a huge social offer, because I happen to experience it as a result, what we currently see, I happened to experience it some years before. I believe it was 2013, 2014. I was in a hall where there was great animosity, where all the ministries, the ministers responsible, myself and Mr. Dracopoulos from New York, where we had a 3-hour discussion. And at the time, our goal was precisely what both Mr. Achtsioglou and Mr. Dracopoulos and you insinuated, that we had to overcome certain things. That is, we were accustomed for the public sector to move 10 steps, we had to make 20, where the citizen has learned to expect 5 things, to realize that the public sector can also offer 10. And actually, when the private sector offers more, the public has the obligation to run faster. And I must definitely mention the fact that at the time when we had in such an extremely difficult ambience with shouts and protests everywhere, it was 2013, the foreigners had selected through Troika to be extremely severe and throw us at the end of the finger. Economy was fragile and we had to keep Greece in Europe. Within this environment, at some point, by elaborating the budget, I realized, along with the ministers of finance, that we lacked 30 million euros for the heating of the schools in the country. And it was then, in the presence of the other ministers, I said on the telephone to Mr. Dracopoulos that we lack this sum and we must have heating for our children. And Mr. Dracopoulos, within seconds, he didn't think twice, he said that the Niarchos Foundation, would pay for the heating of that winter. So when you have someone that continuously makes this kind of override, you must build this metro line the day after. I'm not in the government. Currently, I'm in the ruling party, and I will convey this at the loudest voice possible. But listen, the fact that today we have such an organized situation, and there is this small pillow offered by the foundation to the public, that is 6 years after having presented it. It continues financing both actions and operative expenses of the cultural center. I consider that this is a sine qua non. We must respond with any kind of override towards this, meeting this need. And I believe that this will happen eventually, because this jewel of the crown that was created here, without having ravaged even by half a centimeter the environment, which is really a gem to the city, must be the paradigm for the next moves. And indeed, the agency, this new formula, is precisely this partnership. So this means that after 2013, when the next stage of funding will be over, have you already envisaged the funding of the cultural center? Well, it must have. I can't be certain. I don't know. I'm not in the government, but I consider it self-evident. Madam Achtsioglou, a brief answer if it's easy. SYRIZA is an aspiring political party for the government. If SYRIZA is to become government, will SYRIZA assume these obligations? There are some urban planning issues, there are operative expenses. What could we say? Well, it seems that there are things deriving from the contract, very specific, which the public has to observe, but there are also aspects beyond the contract. There are obligations entailed, such as the transport, the metro line, and it is obvious that it is necessary to have this accessibility, but therefore we must definitely view the issue of the extension of the metro towards here, that also financial obligations. The Ministry of Finance has the obligation to support the center on specific budget. I believe that it's not that difficult to do. Of course, there are fiscal limits, but in the specific case, the financial needs, as seen, can be observed, can be met. There are also other pending issues which concern the National Library, if I'm not mistaken, its personnel and the funding. So there are issues that are entailed and derived from the contract and the state must observe. But there are also issues that go beyond the contract. This care, we must have this care, this concern on what will happen with this public space. To have a continuous care and cooperation, as it happened in the period 2015-2019, a standing committee that will monitor this work. Mr. Dracopoulos heads that the foundation will not be here forever and who should not be here forever. And I believe this is extremely important. Even what are launched and start by donations, they end at the public and should end at the state because they concern the overall society, as it happened with Zapion, for instance. This is how it was launched, and then at the end of the day, it was conceded to the state. Well, I'll come back to Mr. Dracopoulos, but in order to draw to an end this discussion, perhaps there are certain questions or clarifications needed. Let me go back to you, Madam Andriopoulou. Could you please tell us how you currently operate, financially speaking? What is the modus operandi of this SA of the state? What does it do? And allow me immediately a second question. What does it mean for you to have currently a funding of a year? This is precisely what you have. Let me voice my thoughts. Let us say, for instance, that you want to invite the Philharmonic Orchestra of Berlin. Berlin needs a 5-year horizon invitation. You don't know how much money you will have in 5 years. How do you do your programming? That's true. That's a huge challenge. The fact that we do not have the possibility to commit in the long term for certain projects. Until now, there was no problem because indeed we had the donations of the foundation. But on the current horizon, this is a huge challenge for us. As far as our resources at large, so as to understand what I mentioned, some 50% of our budget is currently covered by donations of the foundation. And this covers a large part of our operative expenses and all the events that take place free here. Therefore, the lack of this funding from any resource, be it the foundation or anything else, the lack of this funding would greatly affect what we can offer. The remaining of our resources come from services offered, of the installations, lending the installations to all. You mean what, leasings? No, there's no leasing, because the whole construction was offered by the foundation. There's no issue of leasing, but what the contract also stipulated, and our role is triple. One is to offer services of managing those installations or facilities for all the agencies hosted here, that therefore National Library and Opera as well. So those services have been subcontracted, and this cost is being paid by those agencies, and they come back as a kind of income for us. We have the possibility to have trade revenues from the services offered to visitors, therefore restaurants, parking. This is a small part, or the events of third parties hosted in our venues, in our facilities. It's a very small part vis-à-vis our operative expenses. And we also have a small funding by the Greek state. Our role is not only managing the facilities, but also programming. This is how we operate. I believe this is fully understood. So let us come to Mr. Dracopoulos mention it, but perhaps you would like to reiterate. You said the foundation cannot and does not wish to fund ad infinitum this center. I believe that you have already offered 1 year funding ahead, offering 1 additional year for the Greek state to plan the future of this center. If I'm not mistaken, both the National Library and the Opera give some money that go to the Ministry of Finance. To you as foundation, what is the future? How do you view your future vis-à-vis the cultural center? Well, I still sense it and feel of the foundation as a parent. My child has gone through adolescence, is adult, must live, must do its own life. I can't be behind. That's how I view things. On the other hand, if you see that your child makes a huge effort, does try, does what is due, and nevertheless cannot be fully independent as yet, well, one will help at normal measure. This is our philosophy. On the other hand, we must see that there is a plan, that there are funds earmarked, there are allocations, and to be blunt, we are all viewed as a kind of gain, as if the child says, "Oh, my father is rich, so I will not search for a job." No, it's not so. You must find a job. You will lease your own house. If I see that you do make an effort and you still are in need, I may help you. We are here, but not ad infinitum. So the difference is that what we've done now for 5 years, we did that. The child was still an adolescent. Now, the child is adult. And again, as Madam Achtsioglou has said, we should not stay there. It is not healthy, neither for the project per se, nor the country. It's not healthy to be always behind. The child must leave the house. We must see certain things happening from the other side. The metro, for instance. And that has not to do only that I criticize any government. Various governments come and go. From 2009 onwards, it was in the contract. We had to have a metro line, and this is not the case. We can't have a 20 million visitors project, which, along with Acropolis, is one of the 2 most visited sites in Athens, and not have something that is much needed, that is a metro stop. And we cannot continue writing letters every month. This is what I mean. We must see from the other side some kind of effort that we're here, yes. As we all know, Yes, in the difficult times of 2015, 2016, there was an impeccable cooperation and there was mutual respect because we saw that everybody does one's best. This is what I ask. We must see from the cultural center itself and from the ministries and every government in power to have stamina, to have zest, to have the ownership, as we say. It's not that I own something, because ownership entails obligations as well. It's an issue of worldview, if you like. We're not going to abandon our child, but of course this is not to be excluded. We may have to abandon it, but we would like before that, because time draws to an end, you have to do something. We are present in 136 countries. In order to stay and continue, we must see that there is a fundamental worldview, that we have taken ownership of this cultural center. It is of our society. And if we do what we're supposed to do, then we can ask for additional assistance to a certain extent with great honor. But now they see us as something for granted. But you know, one should never take anything for granted. Thank you. You gave us some perspective for things along with the concerns. Before concluding, before ending, perhaps would like to see whether there are any questions from the audience, something that you would like to ask, a clarification from our discussants. I would please ask you to be brief, relatively speaking. Good evening. We wish many happy returns to this very dear cultural center. Let me address you the following question. Which do you consider were the hurdles it had to do with in its course of these 5 years of its operation? I think that this is a question addressed mainly to Madam Andriopoulou and perhaps Mr. Dracopoulos. Is there a second question so as to have a more organized answering session? Yes, the gentleman. Good evening. Let me congratulate you on the event and wish you many happy returns. This is an astounding space. Being an urbanist myself, I totally agree with the issue of the metro line. We must have this metro linkage, this mass transport means linking with the center. I have a question vis-à-vis the older institutions, that is the National Library and the National Opera. What are their current uses? How are these buildings used currently? Since now we have the new there are new facilities here. The former building of the National Library and the former Opera House in Athens, how are they used currently? And I also think that they should be nice to have a research and monitor the land uses. Perhaps it would be useful to make a use how the land use cadastre has changed. Madam Andriopoulou, please start with the first question. And then I will try, as an urbanist myself, to entail on the second. I don't believe any of the discussants can address the second question. Now, the first question on the challenges and difficulties we were faced with during these 5 years. Well, seeing it, now, I believe that we exceeded any expectation. And a study was conducted before the delivery of the project and the operational plan that envisaged approximately 1 million visits per year. In 2017, we already had 6 million visits before the pandemic. So the wage of this project was gained. The difficulties were of a smaller scale. the pandemic has definitely affected what we could offer, in what ways. Once the pandemic started, had the outbreak in March of 2020, we quickly adapted, and without ceasing for a single moment, we transferred the whole programming in virtual environment. Therefore, although this was a huge challenge, and it still is a challenge, every weekend we have a whole team that changes the planning for the oncoming week. At the same time, it was an opportunity because through this virtual planning, planning, we exceeded our geographic limitations. We have a platform, for instance, for school plans. We had more than 1,000 schools participating in these education programs, not only from Greece, but also from the diaspora. But we wanted to continue offering in a secure way, either intra or extramuros. And the second challenge regards what we have already discussed, that is the financial sustainability of this institution. And especially Mr. Dracopoulos continuously says that the child is adult. Actually, I believe, no, it's not adult, it's still adolescent. There's a long way to go because the cultural center started running on August 16 of 2016. It was inaugurated 15 days earlier. And the organization that was established ran, and ever since we are running after. We're running and trying to plan, materialize, and offer. We're still like a startup. We must organize our structures. We must get mature vis-a-vis internal governors, secure our sustainability, financial sustainability. So this is a major challenge, and we're at the middle, I believe. Now, as far as the buildings of the other agencies hosted now here, Olympia, as you know, is from the municipality. Valianio is organized by the National Library from the Valianios Library, used as a reading venue and as a lending. Well, we don't have representatives here to address. And with regard to the study, the urban planning, you said, the foundation has funded an impact study in cooperation with the Boston Consulting Group 5 years before the delivery of the project, where they were focused on how this project will affect all the facets that will affect financially, socially, environmentally. This was updated 1 year before the delivery of the project. So in 2016, all the impact of the work during the construction had been implemented and could be really measured. It was not a forecast, and was a forecast for the operation phase, how the space and the environment and the surroundings would be affected. And of course, social impact. And currently, we will resume this impact study. And within 2022, we'll be able to see a posteriori what has happened in juxtaposition to the forecasts, what had been what was envisaged and what was actually the impact. Now, looking at the watch, I hope you excuse me if we draw to an end, because there are various things that we must raise at the end regarding the future of this project. I would like to stress the following, because it has been said that, of course, a turn of the city towards the seafront entails certain changes at the center of the city. So it's useful to know what happens with those older shells of those agencies. It is important not to weaken the city center from uses. That is, we currently have a very opposite turn to the seafront. It is equally important to find the appropriate uses for the city center. One must not operate to the detriment of the other. You had another question to raise, however. At this point here, its name is Lighthouse, Pharos. And indeed, it's a lighthouse for the whole of Greece. And as I said, the foundation is present in 136 countries, but we also have got another important place. And I'd like to ask the following. There is the possibility to have a discussion with Mr. Dracopoulos? Although Niarchos is a financial agency and there are many centers which are financial, this point, can it become a global cultural center for the whole of the planet? Thank you. I think this is a nice closure, setting things at a global scale. Yes, Mr. Dracopoulos. Allow me something quick. Mr. Samaras reminded me of that. It is quite interesting that 2012, 2013, when the crisis had started, where we were even saying between us, is it wise to start such a cultural center in war times, actually, because it was war times. I have to say that thanks to this center, because we wanted, it was thanks to this center, because we believe that this for the youth, thanks to this center, and thanks to the work we did, we started this 100 million euros initiatives, that is 300 million euros in sum, against the crisis, for the youth. I say that because the multiplier effect operates both for good and bad. And in conclusion, let me also thank Mr. Samaras and Madam Achtsioglou, because they present the two governments with which we mostly worked this project. The circumstances were very dire, and I thank them both. We speak of two governments which may, ideologically speaking, to be at opposite ends, but they had a common denominator. They both realized and respected this common denominator, which was for the good of the society. And I say that in conclusion because we are united by far more things than what differentiates us. And this is for the future, speaking for all partnerships, so as to be able to deal as society and as humanity, all those things that unfortunately lie ahead. Madam Andriopoulou has said, and I warmly thank her, as well as the whole team of the Cultural Center, which may perhaps be under our scrutiny, but a good parent is always very strict. I thank them all, and I hope that we will go on the best possible way. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dracopoulos. Let me thank Mr. Samaras, Mr. Achtsioglou, Madam Achtsioglou, Madam Andriopoulou. Especially thank you all being here tonight with us to celebrate these 5 years. And either the child is adolescent or adult, I hope that we will accompany it for many years ahead. Thank you.
Πού να τη βρω την ομορφιά μες στο σκοτάδι? Κλειδώθηκε απ' έξω κι εγώ νιώθω χαμένος. Θα περπατήσω ανάποδα διασχίζοντας έναν τους χειμώνες που με έφεραν εδώ. Είπε κανείς ότι είμαστε πολύπλοκοι. Τότε γιατί νιώθω λες και είμαι μία μόνο διάσταση? Μονάχα μια γραμμή. Από εδώ ως την αρχή. Αυτό είναι όλο. Μυρίζω τα σχήματα. Νιώθω στο δέρμα μου τους ήχους. Σαν να ράβει κάποιος στο δέρμα μου αργά, γλυκά και γαργαλιστικά, πεντάγωνα και εξάγωνα, μέχρι να γίνω μπάλα ποδοσφαίρου. Μα πόσος κόπος για μια μπάλα ποδοσφαίρου? Πόσος κόπος για να ξαπλώσω στο χορτάρι, να ρημάξω το προαύλιο, να λερώσω το θρανίο, να γλιστρήσω στη βιβλιοθήκη και να διαβάσω 12 γραμμές στην τύχη. Πάνω σε κόπους έκλαψα, φώναξα, τσακώθηκα. Και τώρα που μιλάω κάποιος σκοπιάζει για να ακούσει. Hop on, hop off στην πλάτη του μπαμπά για να τον πείσω να μου πει το παραμύθι. Πόσες φορές δεν άκουσα τον ψεύτη βοσκό. Νιώθω τα πόδια μου πιο σταθερά. Λες και διασχίζω για πρώτη φορά μονοπάτια γνώριμα. Για φόντο βάζω μια γαλάζια λωρίδα από χαρτί και ένα πλαστικό καράβι. Στη μικρή ανηφόρα το BMX του Θοδωρή και οι τσιρίδες της Κατερίνας ανήμερα της γιορτής της. Ο Κοσμάς με λούζει στις βρισχές γιατί έχασα τον γκολ. Μα πώς να βάλω γκολ? Δεν έμαθα ποτέ μου να κλωτσάω, όπως δεν έμαθα ποτέ μου να χορεύω. Κι όμως τα δάχτυλά μου σαν πεταλούδες μπαλαρίνες γλιστράνε μέσα στις φωλιές από λεβάντα. Με την πλάτη στο χώμα χαζεύω το στόλο των μελισσών και νιώθω τα ρούχα μου να μου σκεύουν. Το χώμα ανοίγει τους πόρους του για να χαρίσει στον κήπο τη δροσιά του. Σταγόνες που νικάνε τη βαρύτητα γίνονται αερόστατα, διαμάντια που ανεβαίνουν προς τη συννεφένια μάνα τους. Η μαμά με ρωτάει ψιθυριστά: «Κοιμάσαι?» Εγώ μιλιά. Έχω στρέψει τις κεραίες προς το γέρο του Καυκάσου που ψάχνει μια σκιά για να κρυφτεί. Ξάφνου γυρίζει απότομα προς το μέρος μου και θέτει το μεγάλο δίλημμα. Ποιον προτιμάς, τον Ποσειδώνα ή την ελιά? Κι εγώ, από πάντα έτοιμος, απαντάω. Ανάμεσα στο αλμυρό νερό και την ελιά διαλέγω την ελιά. Νάτι, η σκιά του. Κλείνω τα μάτια μου και φυλακίζω την εικόνα σου. Τον κήπο στο ξέφωτο, τη λεβάντα, την ελιά, τις μέλισσες και τον κατήφορο που ανοίγεται στην πόλη. Νιώθω πιο σίγουρος τώρα που σε διασχίζω. Οι ώμοι μου είναι όρθιοι. Μπορώ να ακούω πια τα βήματά μου καθαρά, ρυθμικά. Λες και τα πόδια μου λαχτάρισαν κάποια συνάντηση με άλλα πόδια. Και ώσπου να καταλάβω τι συμβαίνει, βουλιάζω σε ένα πανδαιμόνιο από άγνωστα παράφωνα, συντόνιστα γέλια, σαν, τι να σου πω, σαν να προσκάλεσες χιλιάδες φάλτσες μέλισσες να τραγουδήσουν στη γιορτή της μουσικής. Βρήκα το βήμα μου, βρήκα τη στάση μου, βρίσκω και την αναπνοή μου, τα μάτια μου κλειστά και σε διασχίζω με μεγάλη σιγουριά. Νιώθω τα βήματα, νιώθω τις ανάσες, νιώθω τα σώματα. Αχ, τα σώματα, ζεστά και χλιαρά, ψηλά, ογκώδη, σφιγμένα ή ξαπλωτά, μακρόσυρτα σαν έπι, φευγαλαία σαν αστραπές, σέρνονται σαν ανάγνωση που νίσταξε ή αιωρούνται σαν υπονοούμενα. Κι όμως φταίς, σε διασχίζουμε στην ησυχία. Κάποιο χέρι έπιασε το σφουγγάρι και έσβησε όλους τους ήχους. Έσβησε τα μουρμουριτά, τα γέλια, σβήνει και τα κουδούνια. Το πρώτο, το δεύτερο, το τρίτο. Μέχρι που ακούγεται η φωνή σου, καθαρή και μόνη. Μια μελωδία γνώριμη που την ακούω για πρώτη φορά. Χάρη σε σένα βρήκα το πρόσωπό μου.